Myst, Might, Mayhem. By Han Jung-Wioya. Chapter 192. Loyalty. Part 1. In a room with only a single candle lit on the lantern, a man in his early 30s with a small stature was sitting cross-legged in front of the bed. On the bed lay a man with a handsome appearance, his right eye and head wrapped in bandages. He was none other than Na Yelriang, the chief disciple of the Heaven and Earth Society Master. Na Yelriang's left eye, which had been closed as if dead, opened. Swish! Na Yelriang turned his head and looked at the man sitting cross-legged. Noticing this, the man shook his head and spoke. "You really don't look good." Although he had a deep voice, the man had a peculiar voice that sounded like it belonged to a boy before puberty. Na Yelriang, who had been staring intently at this man, spoke, "How long have I been like this?" 3 days. 3 days? At those words, Na Yelriang snorted as if he couldn't believe it. Since reaching adulthood, he had never been particularly injured, and he had never been unconscious for this long. Grit. Everything that had happened during his confrontation with that guy flashed through his mind, including the last moment when he had turned into a poisonous human shield and embraced him. Sting. But why did his right eye hurt so much? That wasn't all. There was pain in his right wrist and right ankle as well. At this, the puzzled Na Yelriang was told by the man, clicking his tongue. "Your right eyeball is gone, and the bones in your right wrist and right ankle are crushed." At those words, Na Yelriang's expression distorted. More than the other injured areas, the fact that his right eyeball was gone made his nerves tingle from head to toe. This is not a pleasant feeling. It was an emotion he was experiencing for the first time. Even when he got angry, it usually ended with just a feeling of unpleasantness, but this lasted longer. Is this the emotion called rage? To Na Yelriang, who was expressing his anger like that, the man said, "Since you're awake, that's a relief. Just before, that person was insisting on having a duel with the Poison King, and I had to break a sweat to dissuade him." Poison King? Yes, why did you fight with that dangerous old man in the first place? Did you suddenly want to subdue the 5 kings or whatever with force? At the man's words, one of Na Yelriang's eyebrows rose. Nevertheless, the man spoke without any fear. "Did I say something wrong?" If it were anyone else, no one would have been able to speak so bluntly to eldest young master Na Yelriang. However, Na Yelriang showed displeasure at the man's words but didn't directly express anger. Was it because he trusted the man that much? At that moment, Na Yelriang stared intently at the man and spoke, "Does everyone know that I ended up like this?" "No." "How is that possible?" "If it were a minor injury, that would be one thing, but if it became known that you suffered an injury of this extent, it would have shaken things up considerably even internally." The information had been blocked, hiding it from everyone. At the man's words, Na Yelriang let out a soft sigh and said, "Then only you and that old man know about it?" "Yes, that person was so stubborn in coming to see you that there was no other way." The man shrugged his shoulders with a disgusted expression. At this, Na Yelriang asked, "Did you tell him not to do anything unnecessary?" "I told him to endure until you woke up if he cared about the eldest young master." "You did well." If the fact that he had suffered serious injuries had been revealed externally, quite troublesome situations would have arisen. The judgment of the man, No, Muyak, was correct. This man, called Muyak, was the closest confidant among Na Yelriang's trusted subordinates. No, he was also the only one with whom Na Yelriang interacted freely, regardless of their status. "What are you going to do?" "Huh? The eye can't be helped, but even if you use a healing technique, it will take a month for the broken bones to recover. Can you endure until you're fully healed?" "Endure? No. That was impossible." Apart from his own injuries, if that guy wasn't dealt with now, there was a high probability that he would become quite troublesome. He had witnessed him gaining enlightenment and surpassing the wall right before his eyes. He possessed monstrous talent, not inferior to himself. At present, he might have the upper hand, but if such a guy was left alone, he would continue to grow. I want to kill him myself, but that would be inefficient for now. There was no need to act emotionally. Anyway, since that guy had also received help from the Poison King, Elder Beck Saha, there would be no complaints if he moved them. Convey this to the old man. You're going to do it after all. I don't have time to wait until I'm fully healed. At his words, Muyak shook his head as if he had expected it and said, Of course you wouldn't. But before that, it would be better to hear this first. This first? If it's not an urgent matter. I think it's urgent. What do you mean? It seems the movements of the second young master, Jang Nung-ake, and the young lady, Wai So-yun, are suspicious. At those words, Na Yelriang scoffed. Leave them be. Those guys are not important. Rather, it seems they are trying to join hands. What? At those words, Na Yelriang frowned. What does this mean? Jang Nung-ake and Wai So-yun are trying to join hands. Why is that? They were practically nemesis. Both Jang Nung-ake and Wai So-yun were desperate to become the successor. Why would they suddenly join hands? However, it didn't end there. I thought the same at first, but while you were unconscious, the situation became more complicated. Became complicated? Yes, last night, all the executives supporting the two disciples gathered for a meeting. But they weren't the only ones. If not only them, then someone else was there too. The Poison King and the Shadow Clan Master also joined the gathering. At those words, Na Yelriang's expression stiffened. Not only did all the executives supporting the second young master Jang Nung-ake and the young lady Wai So-yun gather for a meeting, but the Poison King and the Shadow Clan Master also joined? These bastards. Their support factions had been at a level not even worth keeping in check one by one. However, if the three of the five kings, Bright Blade King, Destroying Axe King, Annihilation Poison King, the two of the three elders, Shadow Clan Master, Water Clan Elder, and the two of the four Valley Masters, Summoning Sound Valley Master and Sun Rock Valley Master, combined their forces, the situation would be different. It wouldn't be an exaggeration to say that these alone had gathered a force slightly exceeding 50% of the sect's power. How did they? It was a situation that was utterly incomprehensible. These people had different goals, so they weren't the type to join hands like the two disciples. But they suddenly decided to join hands? This was. It seems they are determined to properly confront you. Properly confront me? Yes. Otherwise, they couldn't have so cleverly taken advantage of this situation where you suffered serious injuries. It doesn't make sense for that old bastard Poison King to have done this to prepare for the situation that will unfold after you wake up. The moment he heard those words, something flashed through Na Yelriang's mind. It was none other than Mok Jaeonun's face. Huh? Come to think of it, that guy Mok Jaeonun had also become Elder Beck Saha's disciple. If he was the joint disciple of the Shadow Clan Master and the Poison King, he could simultaneously move the two of them. Now the picture was somewhat coming together. He didn't know how he had persuaded the disciples, who were like oil and water, but the one who had created this situation wasn't them. Mok Jaeonun. Pardon? That guy Mok Jaeonun is the one who orchestrated this. What are you talking about? If you mean Mok Jaeonun, isn't he the disciple from the righteous faction hostage that the Shadow Clan Master recently accepted? Yes, that guy did it. At Na Yelriang's confident words, Muyak spoke with an incomprehensible tone. Eldest young master. Even so, that seems a bit far-fetched. What can that youngster, who has only been the Shadow Clan Master's disciple for a little over half a month, possibly do? That youngster did this to me. A youngster did this to you. Wait, what did you just say? I said that guy did this to me. At those words, Muyak was so shocked that he stared at Na Yelriang with wide eyes. What on earth does this mean? It wasn't the Poison King who inflicted these serious injuries? That's impossible. Even if he passed the Corpse Blood Valley's gate as the top disciple, he would be at most at the Danja level, so how could such a youngster? He surpassed the wall during our fight. Wall? Muyak was dumbfounded. For a moment, he doubted his own ears. Wasn't that righteous faction hostage youngster only 17 years old? What do you mean by wall? That can't be. Surpassing the wall means he has reached the transformation realm. At his words, Muyak stared intently at Na Yelriang. It was definitely not a joke. No, in the first place, Na Yelriang never joked. There was no way these words coming from his mouth could be false. Muyak shook his head as if he was disgusted and said, "If that's true, his growth rate is unbelievably fast. He surpassed the wall during a fight? This is really..." Although he couldn't finish his words, what he was trying to say was clear. Monster. He had surpassed the limits of an ordinary human. The only beings Muyak considered as such were his lord, eldest young master Na Yelriang, and that guy who was called the strongest among the 5 tigers. But now, another monster had appeared, so it was truly a calamity. Muyak, who was dumbfounded, barely managed to speak. "Are you really certain that this Mok Jiangan orchestrated this situation?" Although he didn't answer, Na Yelriang was certain. That guy was of the same kind as himself. This wasn't a move that could come from the minds of the 2 disciples or a stubborn old man like the Poison King. It was a move to keep him in check, no, to confront him. "You, who are not even the disciples, want to have a proper duel with me." He truly had guts. "Huh? Eldest young master? Huh? Ha 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 ha." Suddenly, Na Yelriang, who had been frowning, burst into crazy laughter. At that sight, Muyak couldn't hide his puzzlement. If what Na Yelriang said was true, this was a very serious matter. But why was he laughing like this? In the first place, he had rarely shown such laughter, so it seemed he was revealing it after a very long time. After laughing for a while, Na Yelriang stopped. Then, "Not bad." "What is?" Swoosh. At that moment, with a tremendous spirit and murderous intent, Na Yelriang's entire body emanated. It will be worth killing him. Finally, a prey worth hunting had appeared. Na Yelriang genuinely felt the thrill of the hunt. To think that an enemy worth staking everything on and crushing had emerged like this from within. This sense of elation was the first in a long time since that day. Na Yelriang looked at Muyak and said, "From now on, I will enter the 9-palace seclusion chamber to recover and revive my senses." What? The 9-palace seclusion chamber? Muyak couldn't hide his inner surprise. Recovery was, of course, necessary, but entering the 9-palace seclusion chamber meant that he would train in some way. It won't take long. Muyak, in the meantime, persuade all the remaining executives who claimed to be neutral. At those words, Muyak's eyes sparkled. He had been worried that he might lose his motivation due to the serious injuries. But if it was to this extent, there was no need to worry. Rather, it seemed that Mok Jiangan had made a mistake. Eldest young master Na Yelriang had already considered the disciples to be no match for him, so he had stopped increasing his power or keeping them in check. Such a lord had acknowledged Mok Jiangan as prey and an enemy. This was nothing short of the worst omen for that guy. Asterisk asterisk asterisk. Meanwhile, around the same time, in a deep forest near Chongning, Hingyan province, Mok Jiangan, Siap Chen, the 3rd captain commander of the main building, and Mong Muyak, the son of the vice leader, who had been traveling north for 3 days without proper rest, using lightness skills to match the gathering time at the assembly point, decided to camp here for the first time to replenish their stamina. They had divided their roles and briefly separated from each other. Since the surroundings were damp, probably due to rain, Mong Muyak went deeper into the mountains to find dry firewood, Mok Jiangan went hunting for a meal, and Siap Chen took charge of arranging the campsite and preparing traps around it in case of an emergency. Snap! Mok Jiangan grabbed the neck of the rabbit he had spotted and twisted it. For Mok Jiangan, who had lived in the mountains for a long time, night hunting wasn't a difficult task. He already had 2 rabbits hanging from his left hand that he had caught earlier. This should be enough, right? Yes. Rabbit meat. I want to eat it after a long time. At Changrayang's words, Mok Jiangan said. Is that so? Then I'll knock one of them unconscious. So do you want to possess them for a while and have a meal? Who? Should I? She had been feeling stuffy being inside the wooden puppet for too long. She wanted to possess someone and have a meal for a change, like when she was at the Yun Moksword Manor. With that, Mok Jiangan returned to the designated campsite. Siap Chun seemed to have experience with this as well, as he had arranged the surroundings well. He hasn't come back yet. It seemed Mong Muyak was still gathering firewood. It wouldn't be easy to find dry branches since the wood was wet. However, why is that guy staring at us so burdensomely? At Changrayang's words, Mok Jiangan tilted his head. That was because as soon as Mok Jiangan appeared, Siap Chun had been staring intently at him with a suspicious expression, as if he was anxious about something. It didn't seem to be because he was hungry. If he were hungry, he should have looked at the rabbits brought back from hunting. Do you know that mortal guy has been glancing at you continuously for 3 days? More or less. It would have been strange not to notice when he was staring like that. So he had been somewhat wary, wondering if he had received a secret order from the society leader or the vice leader. Right at that moment, Siap Chun looked around and suddenly got up and approached Mok Jiangan. He didn't know what he was doing, but swish! Mok Jiangan brought his index and middle fingers together to form a sword finger seal. If he were to do something unnecessary, it would be better to deal with it in advance. However, Mok Jiangan, why are you doing this? At Mok Jiangan's question, Siap Chun approached within 5 steps and scratched his head as if he was embarrassed about something, and said, I'm quite shy about these things, but, shy? Yes. Bringing this up first to a friend younger than me is quite embarrassing. What do you want to say? Whoa. Don't be so impatient. I said it's embarrassing. Why on earth was he acting like this? While he was puzzled, Siap Chun cleared his throat and said to Mok Jiangan, ahem. If you become the society leader's disciple, wouldn't you need a loyal subordinate to be your right-hand man? Chapter 193. Loyalty. Part 2. Ahem. If you become the society leader's disciple, wouldn't you need a loyal subordinate to be your right-hand man? At the words of Siap Chun, the third captain commander of the main building, Mok Jiangan couldn't hide his puzzlement. He had been wary, wondering if the glances Siap Chun had been stealing at him throughout their journey north were due to a secret order from the society leader or the vice leader. However, at this sudden question, he was momentarily at a loss for words. This mortal guy is quite an interesting fellow. Interesting, you say? I wondered why he was glancing at you for 3 days, but all he wanted to say was, Puhahaha. Changrayang, who had been telling him to be careful until just a moment ago, burst out laughing. Well, in a way, it was something to laugh about. However, Mok Jiangan didn't take these words at face value. It could be a trap. A trap? Yes. Why do you think so? It could be a ploy to plant a spy on me. A spy? Well, that's a possibility. Changrayang also suddenly agreed with this. It was quite suspicious for someone they had just met for the first time due to this confidential mission to suddenly express their desire to join as subordinates. Moreover, wasn't he the captain commander who protected the society leader? At this, Mok Jiangan spoke without showing any particular change in expression. I don't know what you mean by that. You really don't know what I'm saying? Even though I said it so blatantly. Blatantly? What do you mean? At Mok Jiangan's feigned ignorance, Siap Chun scratched his head and spoke in a disappointed tone. I thought we would be on the same page, but it's disappointing. Alright. What is it? No, if you say it like that, what about my position when I've expressed my desire to join under you? In the end, Siap Chun was blatantly expressing his intention. At Siap Chun's words, Mok Jiangan put down the rabbits he had hunted on the ground and said, You want to join under me? Yes. Why? Why, you ask? Didn't I just say it? If you successfully complete this mission, you'll be selected as the society leader's fourth disciple. And that's why I asked if you wouldn't need a loyal subordinate by your side? Well, at Mok Jaehyun's unenthusiastic answer, Seop Chun couldn't hide his awkwardness. He had agonized for 3 days over how to express his intention and had barely taken advantage of the moment when Mong Muyak was away. However, he didn't expect such a lukewarm, if not cold, response. At this, Seop Chun spoke, expressing his disappointment. Do you perhaps not like me? No, that's not it. Seop Chun seemed to be a quite honest person without much greed compared to the people Mok Jaehyun had seen so far. He also had no particular pretense when interacting with others. Then why are you hesitating? I'm getting disappointed. Liking someone and trusting them are separate matters. Trust? Yes. Then you don't find me trustworthy? Do you think you can be trusted? No, why? Even though I may not look like it, I'm someone who always keeps my word once I make a promise. If I consider someone as my own, I definitely take care of them and follow them. Thump thump. Seop Chun thumped his chest, showing his confidence. At this, Mok Jaehyun spoke without any particular change in expression. Words can say anything. It's not just words. If you accept me, I'm prepared to repay that trust, no, to pledge my loyalty as your right-hand man. Is that so? That's what I'm saying. Then why do you want to join under me? At Mok Jaehyun's question, Seop Chun looked directly into his eyes. In fact, Seop Chun had also expected that if he asked to be accepted as a subordinate when they had only met recently, it would naturally raise suspicion. So instead of empty flattery, he decided to express his honest feelings. It's a gamble. A gamble? Yes. Really? What a novel answer. Mok Jaehyun chuckled. He was curious about what passionate reason or justification Seop Chun would come up with, but he never expected him to say it was a gamble. I'm sorry for saying it like this, but wanting to join under you is purely a gamble for me. A gamble? Well, I guess it could be. Yes. To be honest, even if you become the society leader's fourth disciple, that's just the beginning for you. The eldest young master and the other disciples are already running to become the successor with many supporting forces secured. And? What do you mean, and? You'll be in the most disadvantageous position if you become his disciple. You have no support base except for the Shadow Clan, your original sect, and as a former hostage from the righteous faction, it will be difficult for you to gather supporting forces. Seop Chun was expressing his opinion in an almost brutally honest manner. Of course, if revealed as it was, Seop Chun's opinion was accurate. Mok Jaehyun smiled lightly and said, I see. Don't take it too badly. I think a person who wants to be a loyal subordinate should be able to speak this frankly. Speak frankly. There's a saying that good medicine is bitter, right? Is that so? So in conclusion, you're saying you're taking a gamble because I'm in a disadvantageous position. Ahem, that's right. Then why bother going through that inconvenience? Just join under the other disciples. Don't take an unnecessary gamble. At Mok Jaehyun's outright rejection, Seop Chun spoke in a flustered manner, no. If I were going to do that, I would have done it long ago. It's not too late. If there's a disciple you like, there isn't. Pardon? I said there isn't. A disciple I like. At his words, Mok Jaehyun asked in puzzlement, why isn't there anyone you like? They're just all a bit, you know. What do you mean by all a bit? At this question, Seop Chun sighed and caught his breath before answering. This is just between us, but I don't like the second young master, Jang Nun AK, because he has the least talent among the other successors and is crafty. And? The young lady, Wai So Yun, has decent talent and seems desperate in everything, but it's like she's being swayed by her subordinates, should I say? Who? For a guardian of the main building, he had a surprisingly accurate assessment. At this, Mok Jiangan asked, "What about the eldest young master?" "It's ambiguous." "Ambiguous, you say?" "He lacks human touch." "I can understand that as someone walking the path of hegemony, but there are too many talented people around him, so I don't think there's a place for me." "There wouldn't be no place for you. I just don't want to be satisfied with simply joining their subordinates like a nobody." Most of the disciples already have later generation disciples from prestigious martial arts families within the sect serving them. At those words, Mok Jiangan asked in puzzlement, "Aren't you also one of the 5 tigers?" The 5 tigers was a title given only to the top later generation disciples. With such a title and being the 3rd captain commander of the main building, anyone would have no choice but to make use of him. Or so he thought, but no. There's a limit because I have no backing. Backing? Unlike them, I'm from a small to medium-sized martial arts family, so there's a limit. Even if I join under those who already have loyal subordinates, there's a ceiling to how high I can rise. You're quite honest. Of course. Even if I join under someone, my goal is to be recognized and succeed within that group. As his words ended, Chong Ryong's voice echoed in Mok Jiangan's ear. "He's a guy I like." "You like him?" "He has pure desires like honor and success. And fundamentally, he's very honest with his own emotions. A guy like this will risk his life for a master who recognizes his worth. Your evaluation of him is quite positive." "That's how it seems to me." "What about you?" "I don't dislike him. But I'm still not sure." "Do you have doubts?" "Yes." The timing was not appropriate. If it were a different moment rather than during this confidential mission, or if he weren't the guardian commander who protected the society leader, he might have found it intriguing at this point. It was rare to find a pawn who willingly offered their loyalty. "So are you going to just ignore him? Or keep him at a distance?" "I think I'll put him through a proper verification process." "Verification? In what way?" "It's enough to confirm that he's not a person of the society leader or the vice leader." "Confirmation?" While Chong Ryong was puzzled, Mok Jiangan said to Siap Chen, "So you're saying you want to be with me even though I still have no support base and there seem to be many vacant positions around me?" At these words, Siap Chen scratched his head as usual and said, "Vacant positions? Yes, I can't deny that's not the case, but that's not all there is to it." "If that's not all, then what is it? Should I say it's just a feeling?" "A feeling?" "Yes, I'm unexpectedly good at reading people, and you're definitely not someone who will be under anyone." Mok Jiangan smiled without a word. It was a sign of affirmation. At his reaction, the corners of Siap Chen's mouth twitched. As expected, this guy had this side to him. Those who had limits or lacked self-confidence only hid their true selves, but this fellow didn't do that. This was precisely the quality of a leader walking the path of hegemony, in his view. "That's why I wanted to gamble on you. If you're someone who can even surprise the society leader, one of the 6 heavens, I think you can even defeat that monstrous eldest young master." "You're giving me too much credit." "I'm not giving you too much credit. It's reality, isn't it?" "Ah. This isn't empty flattery. I'm saying this because I really think so." "Thank you for that." Siap Chen, who seemed to have loosened up compared to earlier, asked expectantly, "Ahem. Then can you accept me as your right-hand man?" "That would be difficult." At those words, Siap Chen spoke in a deflated voice. "Wow. Even though I'm talking like I'll give you my liver and gallbladder, you should at least say you'll consider it." "Words can say anything." "No. Then should I perform honorable suicide ritual right here for you to believe me?" "There's no need for that. I'm just stating a fact." "A fact?" "Yes." At those words, Siap Chen asked in puzzlement, "What do you mean by that?" "I already have people who are like my right and left arms." At this, Siap Chen frowned. "What does this mean again? He's saying he already has loyal subordinates like his right and left arms? Could they be subordinates assigned by the Shadow Clan?" No. Then were there fellow disciples in the Corpse Blood Valley who showed interest in you? Ah. There are those too. Hey. Yes. No matter what, I'm a talented person who can be considered among the top 5 later generation disciples of the Heaven and Earth Society, so isn't it a bit much to compare me with those youngsters who are still immature? Seop Chun spoke in a disappointed tone. At this, Mok Jae-un chuckled and answered, both of them are stronger than you. What? Ah, no, who on earth are they? Who is stronger than me? Seop Chun asked, as if he couldn't understand and was frustrated. At this, Mok Jae-un shrugged and said, I can't tell you that. You're not my person yet. Are you doing this on purpose? On purpose? I have confidence that I can work hard and support you like crazy so that you can become the best. You should give the right-hand man position to someone like me. Seop Chun sincerely wanted to become Mok Jae-un's most loyal subordinate among his subordinates. That was why he was already betting on him, who had no power or anything. That's far from enough. Arg. This is frustrating. Then should I crawl like a dog if you tell me to, or even lick your soles? That's obviously what you should do. What? Seop Chun stared at Mok Jae-un with a dumbfounded look. Does this guy think a right-hand man is some kind of slave? He was about to let out a hollow laugh because it was so absurd, but... If you want to be a right-hand man, shouldn't you be prepared to at least do this much? There were conditions too? Huh. All right. Tell me. I'll show you that I'm prepared to go that far. You should be able to serve me in life and death, and sometimes, if necessary, you should be able to become a woman too. Seop Chun narrowed his eyes and stared intently at Mok Jae-un. Was he playing word games with him? This was no different from telling him to give up on the right-hand man position. Is this a joke? Does it seem like a joke? Huh. Seop Chun let out a deep sigh. Then he clasped his hands together and spoke in an earnest voice. If you're saying things that are so incomprehensible, it seems like you already have a designated person for the right-hand man position, so at least make me your left-hand man. I need to be given at least that much to have the motivation to serve you. I didn't consider such things, but since you ask, it seems like I have someone who is like a left-hand man too. Huh. How great must the person who becomes your left-hand man be that even that position is already designated? Should I say they have waited for me for generations? To be precise, they had waited for Chong Ryong. However, if it was loyalty that spanned generations to that extent, they could be trusted. At Mok Jae-un's words, Seop Chun snorted as if he couldn't believe it. As far as he knew, it had only been a little over a month since he had been captured as a hostage from the righteous faction, so where would there be someone who would pledge loyalty to him for generations? Do you dislike me that much? No. I like you. If you like me, why are you making such absurd jokes and refusing to accept me as a subordinate? Do I have a reason to joke? At Mok Jae-un's serious tone, Seop Chun frowned. He couldn't understand this guy's true intentions at all. He even thought that he might have done something unnecessary by saying he was taking a gamble. At that moment, Mok Jae-un said, If you prove one thing, I don't know about being a right-hand man or a left-hand man, but I think I can accept you as my person. No. You should at least give me the right-hand man position. I want that position even out of spite. I told you it's impossible. Isn't that too much? If it's to this extent, you should say you'll give it to me. It's already decided. Seop Chun was gradually losing steam. Huh. This is really too much. At this, Mok Jae-un smiled faintly and said, If you want the right-hand man position that much, work hard for generations. If you're lucky, someone from your descendants might become the right-hand man. At these words, Seop Chun raised his voice in an angry tone. Forget it. I'll just give up. What do you mean descendants? What's the point if I can't become the right-hand man myself? Don't be so hung up on such things. Hung up, you say? I'm betting on you, so you could at least give me that much of a position. It's not a gamble, but properly lining up. What? At Mok Jayanun's arrogant expression, Seop Chun's eyes changed. Properly lining up, he said? Then does this guy have the ambition to properly aim for the successor position? He felt a strange sense of elation at the thought of seeing a bit of his unknown intentions, but then Mok Jayanun said, "So do you have any intention of proving it?" At Mok Jayanun's question, Seop Chun controlled himself inwardly. Right. Who would take it at face value if he asked to be made a right-hand man after only knowing each other for 3 days? What was important right now was to have this guy acknowledge his abilities and loyalty. If he continued to show such an attitude, his thoughts might change. He talked as if he had something, but how many people in the Heaven and Earth Society would side with this guy? In the end, he would have no choice but to acknowledge him. All right. I'll do it. I'll do anything, so tell me. Ah. It seems he's coming over there. Huh? The sound of rustling and a familiar presence was felt not far away. It seemed Mong Muyak, the son of the vice leader, had found dry firewood. But what does he mean by it seems? While he was puzzled, Mok Jayanun raised the corners of his mouth coldly and spoke in a meaningful voice. Kill Mong Muyak. Chapter 194. Loyalty. Part 3. Mok Jayanun said with a sardonic smile, "Kill Mong Muyak." Seop Chun's expression instantly hardened. He had been curious as to what Mok Jayanun would demand of him to prove his loyalty. But this was a request he truly did not anticipate. Seop Chun whispered urgently. Hey! Are you doing this on purpose? On purpose? No matter how much you want me to demonstrate my resolve for loyalty, killing Mong Muyak right now is not. Humph. At his words, Mok Jayanun scoffed. Then he said, "It's all just talk after all." Seop Chun's brow furrowed at those words. Could it be that this wasn't just testing him, but he really meant for him to kill? Suddenly, Seop Chun's eyes met Mok Jayanun's. For a moment, he felt a chill run through his entire body. It was truly unsettling. This bastard. Was he really in his right mind? Hey! We're in the middle of a secret mission. Are you not considering that? So what? What do you mean so what? If Mong Muyak dies, how will we make contact with the advance team at the first rendezvous point and get help from the direct subordinates of the society leader in the Imperial Palace? Are you even listening to me? I wonder. Don't give me that. Proving loyalty. I can do that however you want. But killing Mong Muyak, the son of the vice leader, right now means making both the vice leader and the society leader your enemies. Are you not thinking about that at all? Seop Chun could not understand. Since they hadn't completed the mission yet, he hadn't become the society leader's fourth disciple. But making such a demand as if he were already the fourth disciple and engaging in an internal power struggle was the worst judgment. Think carefully. This really won't do. That's troublesome. What? All this advice and whatnot is fine, but fundamentally, I want a dog that follows its master's commands without question. And you seem unfit for that. You. Flinch. Suddenly, Seop Chun's eyes met Mok Jayanun's. He hadn't been aware of it until now, but he understood why this guy gave off a similar feeling to the eldest young master. Even while saying such arrogant and provocative words, there was no emotion felt in his eyes. To the perplexed Seop Chun, Mok Jayanun said, "Only about 13 or 14 are left now." The bushes rustled as footsteps approached. Soon, Mong Muyak would arrive here. It meant to make a decision. He's crazy. Fucking insane. If we really kill Mong Muyak, not only will the mission get screwed up, but everything will be messed up. No matter how much it's to prove loyalty, this is too much. Making enemies before we even start. Many thoughts flashed through Seop Chun's mind in an instant. Proving loyalty. There must be other ways he could prove his loyalty to this bastard. But insisting on killing Mong Muyak, the son of the vice leader, even at the risk of such a reckless move. He didn't trust me from the beginning. That was it. The reason Mok Jiangun gave this order was simple. It was because of his position. As the third captain commander of the inner fortress, he could be acquainted with other successors and frequently contact those in power. Furthermore, he could be considered a person close to the vice leader. Taking all this into account, Mok Jiangun had no choice but to be suspicious of him even if he pledged loyalty. But what if he killed the vice leader's son here? Putting aside the situation, from his point of view, I become a trustworthy person the moment I make the vice leader my enemy. Is that it? Huh. There was no better way to test loyalty. Because by doing this, he too would become an enemy of the vice leader. Damn it. He understood the intention, but it was extremely troublesome. Even if he proved his loyalty, if he did such a thing, he might lose any prospects as a successor even if he became the society leader's disciple. Was he really prepared to handle that? No. This was a test and a trial. Come to think of it, he seemed to have taken it too seriously. Unless Mok Jiangun was an idiot, there was no way he wouldn't know what he was worried about. If that was the case. Right. He just wants to see my resolve. Siap Chen now believed he understood Mok Jiangun's true intention. He meant that if he could confirm that he would kill even the vice leader's son without question at his command, he could trust him. But this bastard wouldn't really intend to kill Mong Muyak right away. If he did that, there would be more to lose than to gain. Then it's different. As long as he showed his resolve, that would be enough. This bastard would prevent the worst-case scenario. Still, he had to show that he followed orders, so although it didn't suit his style, he would have to put on a show of being at odds with Mong Muyak. Alright. I'll do it. Siap Chen said to Mok Jiangun. To this, Mok Jiangun shrugged and replied, I told you words alone are meaningless. I said I'll do it. Don't nag. Rustle. Soon, Mong Muyak appeared, carrying dry firewood using spare clothes. Mong Muyak, who was already a man of few words, silently looked at the 3 rabbits lying on the ground. He got them. Although he didn't show it, he was hungry after 3 days of fasting. While it was said that high-level martial artists could control their appetite to some extent through qi circulation or internal energy, if there was no food intake, prolonged fasting would inevitably lead to difficulty. Mong Muyak said to them, Who will start the fire? He asked this, but the one he was looking at was Siap Chen. It meant for Siap Chen to start it. At his words, Siap Chen approached Mong Muyak without a word and said, You managed to get them? Good work. As expected, there was no response. At Mong Muyak's attitude, Siap Chen felt slightly irritated. Anyway, this bastard doesn't know how others feel. No, this is good. He was hesitant to attack him outright, but if he provoked him like this, it would serve as a suitable justification, and he could act emotionally. Phew. Whatever. Give me the firewood. With that, Siap Chen reached out to Mong Muyak to receive the firewood. Then, instead of handing it over directly, Mong Muyak put the firewood he was carrying down on the ground, as if telling him to pick it up himself. Thud. Figure it out yourself. And he tried to turn around. That moment. Pick it up. Mong Muyak, who was turning his body, furrowed his brow. Even when he usually acted cold, Siap Chen only grumbled and left it at that. But now, those words were laced with a sharp edge. Was he very upset? Well, they had been heading north for 3 days straight without rest while fasting, so everyone was tired and on edge. Should I just pick it up for him? No. Although he had the thought that it was possible, he didn't feel like picking it up for him. The moment he picked it up, it would be like he was yielding. At this, Mong Muyak retorted sharply. Don't be so sensitive over such a... It was at that very moment. Whoosh! Siap Chen launched himself toward Mong Muyak. It was such a sudden attack that Mong Muyak was startled for a moment and tried to gain distance, but Siap Chen's sword strike infused with qi had already grazed his left shoulder. Shik! Ugh! What are you doing? Mong Muyak, whose shoulder was cut, twisted his body with footwork and hurriedly threw a kick at Siap Chun. Of course, Siap Chun easily dodged it by twisting his body. As soon as he dodged, Siap Chun's left-hand sword energy struck Mong Muyak's abdomen. Bang! Ku! Whoosh! Mong Muyak's body was pushed back about 5 steps from the sword energy he received. Mong Muyak's expression distorted terribly. Up until the first strike, he thought it was an attack made out of an emotionally agitated impulse. However, the sword energy just now to the abdomen went beyond that. As a result, he suffered internal injuries. Cough. Drip, drip. Dark blood flowed from the corner of his mouth. Let's have a go at it. You son of a bitch. Whoosh. Mong Muyak, his eyes wild with internal injuries, launched himself at Siap Chun. Bam, 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 bam. In an instant, the two masters, who had earned the title of 5 tigers, clashed for about 10 exchanges. They didn't draw their unique weapons, the sword and saber, but they raised their chi and aimed for each other's vital points as if to kill. Being like troublemakers in the main sect, they knew each other quite well. Therefore, each move was close to a stalemate. Bam, 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 bam. Up to nearly 30 seconds into the confrontation, neither of them was pushed back. However, even if they possessed equal martial arts, as the confrontation dragged on, superiority gradually began to show. Shik. HNNG. Little by little, wounds appeared on Mong Muyak's body. On the other hand, Siap Chun had not been grazed even once by Mong Muyak's sword energy. This gave a hint as to who was more intuitive, experienced, and skilled between the two. Siap Chun was about half a step ahead. Swish, shik. Siap Chun, who had cut part of Mong Muyak's back with flashy footwork, glanced at Mok Jiangan. Mong Muyak's clothes were gradually being stained with blood. If the confrontation dragged on, he was likely to win. You saw that, right? Although they didn't use swords and sabers, they didn't hold back against each other, so he thought this much was enough to prove his resolve. He hoped Mok Jiangan would tell them to stop soon. However, what the? Mok Jiangan was leaning against a tree with his arms crossed, just watching. With a look in his eyes that seemed not very pleased. At this, Siap Chun felt incredulous. It's dangerous if we go on. He had already grasped most of the weaknesses in Mong Muyak's swordsmanship. If he put his mind to it, he was confident he could end the match within 3 moves. Of course, that ending meant the process of driving the opponent to death. How else do you want me to prove it? Now that you've confirmed my resolve, tell us. To stop. Siap Chun blatantly gave Mok Jiangan a look. Wasn't this enough? However. Shoo. Mok Jiangan made a gesture of slitting his own throat. Seeing this, Siap Chun's eyes wavered. WH what? He wasn't going to stop them, and what did that gesture mean? Could this bastard really mean for him to kill Mong Muyak? He's out of his mind. If Mong Muyak died, everything would be messed up. Even before properly starting the successor's battle, he might end up with enemies and be unable to do anything. Siap Chun used lip reading to say this was not it. This much is enough. We have to stop here. If we go any further, everything will. It was at that very moment. Shik. In an instant of their fierce clash, someone intervened between them. At that moment, Siap Chun's eyes widened as if they would tear. Something brushed past and fell to the ground. It was Erg. None other than Mong Muyak's left arm. A scream erupted from Mong Muyak's mouth as his arm was severed below the elbow. He could endure it if it was just a wound, but the pain of having an arm cut off was beyond imagination. Siap Chun turned his head with an exasperated look. There stood Mok Jiangan, raising his chi-infused hand with an indifferent gaze. You really? Do my words sound like a joke to you? The vice leader. If you really kill the vice leader's son, the aftermath, Do you think stalling and pretending is proving loyalty? For a moment, Seop Chun was at a loss for words. It seemed he had misjudged this bastard. This Mok Jayangan wasn't just similar to the eldest young master Na Yelriang, but beyond him. Seop Chun was stunned for a moment. Did I make the worst gamble of my life? This wasn't the picture he wanted. He didn't want to step on a landmine from the start, but rather wanted to start together with this bastard even if he had no foundation. To the perplexed Seop Chun, Mok Jayangan smiled and tapped his own head. Don't use your head. I don't want a dog that interprets things on its own. When I give a command to bite, I want a dog that can thoroughly tear out the opponent's throat. You. I said words are meaningless, didn't I? Mok Jayangan pointed at Mong Muyak with a flick of his finger. The meaning was very clear. It meant to finish it. Ugh. Mong Muyak, holding the severed end of his arm and suffering, took faltering steps backward. For the first time, he spoke with a face full of fear. Why are you doing this? Seop Chun's expression distorted even more as he watched this sight. The milk had already been spilled. Although he had held back, he had pushed Mong Muyak to the brink, and even if he hadn't done it himself, he had even cut off his arm. At that point, there was no way to salvage the situation. My resolve was half-baked. It seemed that from the moment he wanted to become the right-hand man of the one who had to walk the path of a villain, he should have been prepared for such an outcome. Clench. Seop Chun, who had been biting his lip hard, finally sighed and Xing drew his unique weapon, the Guangmudo. Resent me. He apologized to Mong Muyak in his mind. Although they had no relationship of grudges, from the moment he tried to join Mok Jayangan's ranks, he had crossed a river of no return. Seop Chun swung his saber at the neck of Mong Muyak, who was stepping back trying to escape. His single saber strike, devoid of any distracting thoughts, held not a shred of hesitation. Clang! That moment. His single saber strike, aiming to sever Mong Muyak's head in one breath, stopped right in front of him. Seop Chun looked at Mok Jayangan with widened eyes. Because the one who had blocked the Guangmudo's blade was none other than Mok Jayangan's hand. Seop Chun stared at him with an expression of incomprehension. To him, Mok Jayangan said, "Just do it." What? TSK. If you had been like this from the beginning, there would have been no need to even cut off his arm. You. Flinch. For a moment, Seop Chun, who was about to say something out of disbelief, couldn't continue his words. The moment he saw that face full of malice, with a smile reaching his ears, a chill running up his spine kept his lips from moving. Chapter 195. Loyalty. Part 4. The third captain commander of the inner fortress of Heaven and Earth Society, Seop Chun, who had witnessed Mok Jayangan's true face filled with pure malice, momentarily lost his words as a chill ran up his spine. It seemed he had been mistaken after all. Seop Chun had felt that Mok Jayangan was similar to Na Yelriang, the society leader's great disciple. But that wasn't the case. Certainly, both of them were definitely different from ordinary people. However, if the eldest young master Na Yelriang gave off a cold feeling of being emotionless and solely pursuing the path of a villain, Mok Jayangan appeared to be pure evil itself. How could such a person exist? A trembling rose from within him. At that moment, thump! Mong Muyak collapsed. The state of Mong Muyak, who had his eyes rolled back and his body trembling, did not look good. It seemed that on top of having his arm cut off, he had suffered a great shock from nearly having his neck sliced as well. Thanks to that, Seop Chun, who had been gripped by fear for a moment, was able to come to his senses. You went too far. What? I said you went too far. In what way? If it was for loyalty, what I did earlier was more than enough to prove it. But what was the reason for pushing it this far? If we had ended it then, as you said, like this. I told you pretending is meaningless. That's Is there any other way for you to prove right here that you weren't going to monitor me on the vice leader's orders or work for other successors? Siap Chun couldn't answer to this. Although he had crossed the line, what Mok Jae-eun said was correct. No, should he say it was wise? Thanks to this, I have no choice but to be in the same boat as this bastard. It was from the moment he attacked the vice leader's son, Mong Muyak. From his position without any backing, he had no choice but to follow Mok Jae-eun to avoid becoming an enemy of the vice leader. But he couldn't help feeling conflicted. Just a moment ago, he wanted to achieve great things together with Mok Jae-eun and make his family name and his own name resound not only throughout the Heaven and Earth Society but the entire Central Plains. But now that he had seen the true face of the evil inherent in Mok Jae-eun, he was frightened. Was he truly someone he could trust and follow? Wouldn't this be the worst choice? Why are you staring at me like that? To be honest, I'm afraid. Afraid? Yes. Of what? I'm afraid of you, and just now, I had doubts about whether choosing you would be the right decision for me. Very honest of you. Even if I had steeled my resolve, I can't help it after seeing your true self. True self? Mok Jae-eun chuckled. Then, he approached Siap Chun, lightly tapping his shoulder, and said, I like that. I commend you for facing me head-on and not turning away even after seeing that side of me. It was a truly peculiar compliment. Should he take this as a compliment? But what was it that strangely made him waver at the words of this guy who was younger than him? Was it because of the leadership qualities this guy possessed? Or was it this guy's capacity? Siap Chun opened his mouth. I have a wish. A wish other than being my right-hand man and left-hand man? Yes, I have one. What is it? Fear is fear, but I hope there will be a sense of fulfillment in following you. At those words, the corners of Mok Jae-eun's mouth twitched. A sense of fulfillment. From the moment he joined him, he would walk a path stained with blood, so would this person be able to feel a satisfactory sense of fulfillment from that? As he was pondering this, Chong Ryong's voice was heard. No need to think too much. There is no such thing as a master-servant relationship without giving and taking. Rather than making a fuss about a sense of fulfillment, you just need to appropriately fulfill their desires. I see. I'm learning something again. At Mok Jae-eun's words, Chong Ryong cleared her throat and said, Ahem. Why are you acting like you're learning something new? Mok Jae-eun chuckled and said to Siap Chun, Don't worry too much. If you faithfully perform your role, you will undoubtedly obtain what you desire. I can certainly promise you that. At these words, Siap Chun let out a soft sigh. Hearing such words from Mok Jae-eun made him feel much better. He hoped it would really turn out that way. That way, this choice wouldn't become the worst. Thud. With the matter settled, Siap Chun knelt on one knee and clasped his hands, shouting to Mok Jae-eun. Siap Chun, the third captain commander. I pledge my loyalty to young Master Mok Jae-eun. Please accept it. Mok Jae-eun stared intently at Siap Chun, who was pledging his loyalty. A glint of interest shone in Mok Jae-eun's eyes as he looked at him. Siap Chun was a different type of subordinate from those he had brought under his command so far. He had come to him of his own accord. And even after seeing a side close to his true nature, he didn't turn away from it and even showed honesty about that fear. This isn't bad either. It's because you gained a subordinate in a proper way. Is that so? Mok Jae-eun chuckled at Chong Ryong's words. A proper way. This was the one thing he didn't particularly agree with Chong Ryong's words. He was simply making the most optimal choice for the situation. I accept. Mok Jae-eun said to Siap Chun. Then Siap Chun bowed his head to the ground, paying his respects. Since his loyalty was accepted, he was showing proper etiquette. It was said that the ruler, the master, and the father who gave birth to you are one and the same. So, one shows respect with a bow. Having fulfilled the etiquette, Siap Chun stood up and said, Since I have decided to serve you as my lord, I will address you with respect from now on. Please speak comfortably, my lord. I will do so gradually. You don't have to be formal. Feel free to. When the time comes, I will do so. For now, this is more comfortable for me. Seop Chen didn't hide his puzzlement. But what could he do if Mok Jayangan, his lord, said he would do so? He was only following his lord's will. More than that, this seemed to be the priority. Seop Chen checked the condition of the collapsed Mong Muyak, the vice leader's son, and sighed, saying, "Phew. The bleeding is severe, and his condition is not good." It was as expected. Tap, 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 tap. Seop Chen pressed Mong Muyak's acupuncture points to stop the bleeding, hurriedly raised his severed left arm above his heart, and tore a piece of cloth to tightly tie it so that there would be no more bleeding. After taking these measures, Seop Chen clicked his tongue and said, "My lord, do you have a plan?" "A plan?" "Yes, I don't want to blame what has already happened, but he is the vice leader's son. Moreover, he was selected for this mission, so is it okay to do this?" Seop Chen was genuinely concerned. Would Mong Muyak, whose arm was cut off, still be willing to carry out the mission with them? Or would he return like this and report it to the society leader or the vice leader? If that happened, everything would be messed up. However, "Are you worried?" Mok Jayangan showed no such concern. Was he not worried at all even when things might turn into a disaster? To Seop Chen, who was furrowing his brow, Mok Jayangan said, "More importantly, search his body to see if there's anything." "Excuse me?" "I said to search him." "Understood." At Mok Jayangan's command, Seop Chen was momentarily puzzled but searched the collapsed Mong Muyak's belongings without further question. There was nothing particularly noteworthy other than silver coins and the Heaven and Earth Society's identity tags. However, he found something unexpected hidden in a small pouch inside his leather shoes. Rummage, rummage. Huh? What was this? Inside was a small red bottle. What the hell was this that he had hidden inside his leather shoes? Seop Chen, who was staring at it with questioning eyes, soon brought it to Mok Jayangan. He was hiding this. Is that so? Mok Jayangan, holding the small bottle about the size of 2 fingers, shook it. It was difficult to guess what was inside with just this. So Mok Jayangan gestured to Mong Muyak with his head and said to Seop Chen, "Wake him up." "Is it okay to wake him up right now?" "Is there any reason not to?" "Understood." Seop Chen pressed one of Mong Muyak's acupuncture points and infused internal energy into him. Soon, Mong Muyak, who had lost consciousness, opened his eyes. Gasp. Mong Muyak, who had opened his eyes, abruptly sat up and looked at Seop Chen with a perplexed expression while coughing. Cough, cough. For a moment, Mong Muyak thought he had been dreaming. But soon, he discovered his severed left arm and realized this was reality. Mong Muyak frowned, unable to bear the pain. Seop Chen couldn't hide his inner guilt towards him. He lost his arm because of me. If he had attacked with the intention to kill from the beginning, as Mok Jayangan said, perhaps the incident of his arm being cut off wouldn't have happened. For a martial artist to lose an arm, it meant problems with balance and everything else, signifying a sharp drop in combat power. He fully understood the guy's state of mind. Then, Mong Muyak spoke with eyes full of mixed emotions. "Have you betrayed us?" At his question, Seop Chen hurriedly waved his hands and said, "No way. Why would we betray Heaven and Earth Society?" "Then why?" Mong Muyak raised his voice. Filled with anger, he glared at Seop Chen and then shifted his gaze to Mok Jayangan, saying, "Why did you do this?" He held up his severed arm. He wanted to cut off their arms in the same way, but knowing he was at a disadvantage, he barely suppressed his anger and lowered his voice. To him, Mok Jayangan said with a smile, "Are you resentful that your arm was cut off?" "You." The anger he had barely suppressed flared up again at the mocking tone. Seop Chen warned him. "Calm down. Calm down? If you were in this situation, do you think you could calm down? How could you do this if you're not spies or traitors?" Seop Chen couldn't answer to this. He felt too sorry to tell him that he had attacked to prove his loyalty. But Mok Jae-un didn't seem to have such feelings at all. With a still smiling face, he approached Mong Muyak. Then, he held out the red bottle and said, "More importantly, what is this?" Mong Muyak, who had been unable to control his anger just a moment ago, quickly calmed down. How did that? That was what his father, vice leader Mong Seocheon, had given him. If that bastard contacts the righteous faction or shows suspicious signs, use this. You know how to use it, right? Mong Muyak instinctively crossed his ankles and checked if the bottle hidden inside his leather shoes was there. But it wasn't. Damn it. They must have searched his belongings. The person his father, the vice leader Mong Seocheon, had told him to use this on was none other than Mok Jae-un. Seeing Mok Jae-un holding that, he was extremely perplexed. Unable to say anything, Mok Jae-un asked him again. "It's your own item, so you won't say you don't know, right? Why aren't you answering? Do you not know what this is?" At the repeated questions, Mong Muyak finally made an excuse. "It's something necessary for this mission." Mission? Yes. Come to think of it, he hadn't used it yet, and if he made an appropriate excuse that it was for a secret mission, it would be a solvable problem. What could he do to him with this? But then, Mok Jae-un chuckled and said, "Something necessary for the mission?" "Yes, it's nothing special." "Ah, I see. When the mission starts, you'll find out." Since it has practically already started, it wouldn't matter if we found out now, would it? Mong Muyak calmly responded to Mok Jae-un's persistent questioning. "The advance team said they would inform me of the exact purpose, so I truly don't know either." The advance team? Yes. If he made this excuse, they wouldn't be able to question him further. However. Is that so? Mok Jae-un, who had been nodding his head, opened the lid of the red bottle he was holding. "Pop. What are you doing? Close it right now." Mong Muyak shouted at Mok Jae-un in a moment of panic. To this, Mok Jae-un tilted his head and said, "Why are you so startled? Close it quickly." "I said close it. This is strange. Why are you making such a fuss about closing it as soon as I open it when you claim you don't know what it is?" "That's... Do you really not know?" I was just told it's dangerous. That's why, so please close it." Mong Muyak pleaded, almost begging. But Mok Jae-un instead held the bottle closer to him. Then Mong Muyak frantically struggled, trying to distance himself. "You really... Hold him." At Mok Jae-un's command, Seop Chun pressed down on Mong Muyak's shoulders. "I'll let go." Seeing him react with such disgust, as if he were having a seizure, Mok Jae-un became genuinely curious about what was inside this bottle. So, he brought the bottle closer and said playfully, "Even if it's dangerous, it wouldn't hurt to use a little, right? Since you won't be able to carry out the mission with that body anyway, for our sake." It's the explosive shattering worm." "Pardon? What's inside is the explosive shattering worm. It's very small and can enter through the mouth or nostrils, so please close it. I'm begging you." In the end, Mong Muyak revealed the truth. At this, Mok Jae-un chuckled and closed the lid of the bottle. "You said you didn't know, but you did? Don't tremble so much. I had blocked the opening with internal energy." At these words, Mong Muyak gritted his teeth. This bastard was toying with him. But even if he showed his emotions here, there would be nothing beneficial for him. For the mission, I was told to keep it a secret and know about it alone. I didn't hide it out of ill intent. I'm sure. What exactly is the explosive shattering worm? Mok Jae-un had never heard of it either. So Mong Muyak said, "It's a bug that inhabits the remote deserts of the western regions. Since it's called a worm, that's natural. But judging from your reaction, it seems quite dangerous?" "Yes. If it enters the body, it burrows into the blood vessels and circulates through the meridians. It burrows into the blood vessels? At these words, Seop Chun clicked his tongue. Just listening to it, it sounded like a terrifying and highly dangerous bug. But why did he bring such a dangerous thing, saying it would be used somewhere in the recapture mission? As he was puzzled, Mok Jaehyun said, "Just circulating through the meridians would be dangerous enough, but I don't think that's the end of it. There are other problems, right? Cunning bastard." It was difficult to deceive him at all. In the first place, since it was already a situation where he couldn't deceive him, Mong Muyak revealed the truth. This bug is very vulnerable to sunlight. Sunlight? Yes. That's why in the western regions, it's also called the desert night crawler. Desert night crawler? It takes only 1 or 2 hours to lay eggs and become an adult. However, this bug is so vulnerable to sunlight that it explodes and dies if it's exposed to even a little light. That means, yes, if infected with the explosive shattering worm, the moment you're exposed to sunlight, the meridians throughout your body will burst and you'll die. Huh. At Mong Muyak's words, Seop Chun shook his head. In a way, this seemed more dangerous than even the deadliest poison. With poison, there was at least a possibility for a high-level martial artist to perform qi circulation and detoxify it on their own. But would it be possible to catch and remove one by one the tiny bugs that enter the body and flow through the meridians? It might be impossible. It's impressive that they found such a bug. I don't know how they found it either. I heard that because it's vulnerable to light, it parasitizes moles, earthworms, and insects deep underground in the desert, making it difficult to discover. But here it is? Mok Jaehyun shook the bottle wildly. Then Mong Muyak said anxiously, "Be careful. No matter how sturdy the bottle is, if it accidentally breaks, it will be a real disaster." "I'm sure. But why did our vice leader's son bring such a dangerous thing?" At Mok Jaehyun's words, Mong Muyak sighed and replied, "Didn't I say? I brought it for the mission." "The mission? I see." With those words, Mok Jaehyun whispered in Mong Muyak's ear, "But that mission is to use it if Mok Jaehyun, the hostage bastard from the righteous faction, contacts other righteous faction members or shows suspicious signs in the imperial palace, right?" Instantly, Mong Muyak's face turned pale and stiffened. How the hell did this bastard know about this? Chapter 196. Loyalty. Part 5. Mong Muyak's face stiffened. How did this bastard know about the secret order his father, Vice Leader Mong Seo Cheon, had given him before departing on the confidential mission? When high-level martial artists have a private conversation, they use internal energy to control the sound from spreading in all directions. So unless one reads lips up close, it's difficult to discern what was said. Father had his back turned and was at a distance. But how does he know without a single word out of place? It was so absurd that he was utterly perplexed. To the speechless Mong Muyak, Mok Jaehyun whispered with a smile, "You see, such a secret order doesn't really need justification and just depends on the will of the person carrying it out, don't you think? What are you? The suspicious signs would ultimately just be a hunch, so it's interesting that such an order was given." "No. That's not it. This is truly just in case." Just in case. What a nice phrase. But I'm not generous enough to let someone who targets my life based on their arbitrary judgment off the hook. At these words, Mong Muyak felt like his heart would explode. Although he had an arrogant and haughty personality, it didn't mean he was bold in everything. Is he trying to kill me? If it were others, he would have tried to escape the situation even if it meant selling out his father. But strangely, those words didn't come out. That's because if the bastard had cared about such things from the beginning, he wouldn't have been able to cut off his left arm. This bastard will definitely do it. Convinced that Mok Jaehyun would kill him, Mong Muyak finally surrendered. And no, really. Even if I received the order, it was truly just in case. I never intended to frame you. I wonder. I mean it. Mok Jaehyun stroked his chin as if pondering. Then Mong Muyak became even more restless and pleaded with Mok Jiangan, "Believe me. I swear on my family's honor that I had no such intention. You stake your honor too easily." Flinch. Sharp chi was felt from Mok Jiangan's hand. Damn it. Seeing Mok Jiangan show no openings, Mong Muyak became anxious. It felt like Mok Jiangan would slice his throat at any moment. Then, Sieb Chun's voice reached his ears. "If you truly had no such intention, pledge your loyalty to the Lord." What? What did he just hear? Pledge loyalty? What the hell are you? Lord? Did you just say Lord? Mong Muyak's eyes widened. Come to think of it, although they usually acted like rivals, he knew Sieb Chun well. As the third captain commander of the main sect, Sieb Chun's position was different from other executives or any other society members, so he couldn't openly support anyone. He was in a position to directly guard the current society leader. But Lord? Yes. I said Lord. You. I have decided to serve young Master Mok Jiangan as my lord. Huh? Mong Muyak was truly dumbfounded. They hadn't even succeeded in the secret mission yet, so he hadn't become the fourth disciple. But the main sect's guard captain, who shouldn't support anyone due to his position, decided to serve this bastard as his lord? For what reason? He couldn't comprehend it at all. Shoo. At that moment, Sieb Chun clasped his hands together and apologized to Mok Jiangan. "Forgive me, my lord. It's not my place to intervene, but since he is the vice leader's son, it would be better to make him an ally rather than an enemy." With these words, Sieb Chun glanced at Mong Muyak. "This is the best consideration I can give you." He had lost his left arm because of him, and now his life was in danger due to that bastard's secret order. The only way for him to live was to pledge loyalty to Mok Jiangan. Although they had acted like rivals, he hoped he would make a wise choice. No, please do it. If he died now, inevitably all the arrows of suspicion would naturally point to them. Then the vice leader would become an enemy. At that moment, Mok Jiangan said, "That's unnecessary." Pardon? No matter what, he is the vice leader's son. That's... Would the vice leader's son yield to the power of others and be forced to pledge loyalty to someone else? No way. He has pride, so he would rather commit suicide for his father than do such a thing even if he dies. Right? Mong Muyak couldn't answer to Mok Jiangan's words. If he agreed here, he would have no choice but to choose death. Certainly, it was right to preserve his pride, but death was the end of life. It was too frightening for everything to end. No answer? You're trying to preserve your pride after all? See. You're befitting of the vice leader's son. Rather than wasting time, it's better to cleanly kill him here. Wait. Wait. Loyalty. I will pledge loyalty. Pardon? I didn't hear you well. What did you say? I will pledge my loyalty. Thud. Mong Muyak hurriedly pressed his head to the ground. Although his pride was hurt, surviving was the priority for now. Come to think of it, he could pretend to pledge loyalty and then return to the Heaven and Earth Society to wait for an opportunity. Anyway, with his left arm severed, he could no longer continue the mission. Yes. Humiliation is only for a moment. The moment he escapes from here and reports to his father, this bastard is finished. Mong Muyak was determined to endure this moment. Then Mok Jiangan lifted his head. Shoo. Mok Jiangan was licking his lips. The moment he saw that face, his heart raced like crazy as a chill ran up his spine. What the hell was this guy? It was as if he was disappointed that he couldn't kill him. To him, Mok Jiangan said, "I suppose life is better than pride." No answer? That's right. You are correct. But you know what? What is it? It might be better to die. Pardon? Mok Jiangan grinned. That smile was so full of malice that Mong Muyak felt nauseous and like he would vomit. He was holding it back, but it was the first time he was so afraid of someone. He couldn't believe this bastard was from the righteous faction. I need to escape quickly. He wanted to return to the Heaven and Earth Society. Then Mok Jaeongun said, "Well, anyway, since you say you'll become my person, I should reward you for that." At those words, Mong Muyak waved his hands. "Ah, no. How could I expect a reward?" He just wanted to be sent back home. That way, he could inform his father and the society leader about the true colors of this crazy, evil bastard. But shoo! When Mok Jaeongun extended his hand, something flew into his grasp. Smack! It was none other than, this is Mong Muyak's severed left arm. Ugh! It was truly bizarre. He was fine when he saw other people's corpses, but seeing his own severed arm made it difficult to hold back his retching. He really has terrible taste. Seeing this, Seop Chun clicked his tongue inwardly. He would already be suffering from having his arm cut off, so how shocked would he be to receive that as a reward? Since he couldn't continue the mission and could be sent back, he should be treated well, but he didn't understand why Mok Jaeongun was doing this. Then Mok Jaeongun said, "I'll return your arm." Ugh. Thank you. Mong Muyak forcibly swallowed the rising vomit and tried to receive his severed arm. But Mok Jaeongun shook his head. "That's not what I meant." "Pardon? Then what?" "Extend your left arm." Mong Muyak made an expression of incomprehension at Mok Jaeongun's request. Why was he telling him to extend his left arm? Was he toying with him now? Then Mok Jaeongun let out a soft sigh and pulled Mong Muyak's severed left arm. Grip. Ugh. What is this? I said I'll return your arm. Return it, what do you? The blood vessels and nerves need to be reconnected, so I'm asking for your understanding in advance. Under. Shik. KHH. Spurt. At that moment, a sharp chi brushed past, and blood flowed from the left arm where the bleeding had stopped. The pain was less than when it was first cut off, but it was unavoidable, so Mong Muyak's face contorted. Then Mok Jaeongun placed the severed arm against the cut surface of Mong Muyak's bleeding left arm. Both Mong Muyak, the person involved, and Seop Chun were dumbfounded. Did he really think the severed arm would reconnect just by attaching it like this? If that was the case, he was truly insane. Seop Chun. Yes? Hold it so it doesn't fall off. What the hell was he trying to do? Seop Chun looked at him with an expression that was hard to understand. To him, Mok Jaeongun urged in a small voice. Don't make me say it twice. Why yes. Seop Chun, who had grasped Mok Jaeongun's personality, hurriedly carried out the order. He didn't know why he was doing this nonsense, but he held the severed arms as ordered so they wouldn't fall off. Then Mok Jaeongun made a sword finger with his right hand and placed it on one part of the severed area. And with his left hand. Clap. 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 I'm arrival. 2. Fight. John, front. J, present. Jean, array. Guy, all. He formed the abbreviated hand seals of the 9-character mantra. As he formed the hand seals, a red heat flowed from the tip of Mok Jaeongun's right-hand sword finger. Mong Muyak was startled by the heat. What the hell was he trying to do? Then Mok Jaeongun moved the sword finger along the severed area. In that state, the great general of the east, the Azure Emperor, help me. The great general of the center, the Yellow Emperor, help me. The great general of the west, the White Emperor, help me. The great general of the north, the Black Emperor, help me. The great general of the center, the Yellow Emperor, help me. He chanted the incantation inwardly. Sizzle. Along with this, an agonizing pain arose from the severed area where the sword finger passed, as if it were being burned. The pain was more excruciating than when the arm was cut off. Naturally, a scream had to burst out. Aergurk. How noisy. Aergurk. Tisk, tisk. Shoo. Mok Jayangan waved his left hand, and Mong Muyak's mouth was shut due to the profound internal energy. MMMPPPHHH. Smirking at Mong Muyak, whose eyes were even glistening with tears, Mok Jayangan continued to move the sword finger along the severed area. Sizzle. Wugongon gak gak wu. MMMPPPHHH. Mong Muyak twisted his body, trying to struggle in agony. Of course, Siap Chun was holding his arms, and Mok Jayangan was also pressing down on his body, including his mouth, with internal energy, so he couldn't move an inch. Soon, Mok Jayangan's sword finger completely circled the severed area. Sizzle. As he removed the sword finger, the severed area was glowing red. Mok Jayangan smiled upon seeing this. Then Siap Chun asked, "Do I have to keep holding it?" "No, you can let go. If I let go, it will fall off." He didn't know what he did, but it seemed like he had cauterized the wound with something like burning internal energy. But how could a severed arm reconnect with just that? It would surely fall off. Siap Chun was inwardly puzzled but let go of his hands as ordered for now. However, what? Surprisingly, Mong Muyak's severed arm, which he thought would fall off, didn't. What the hell did he do? There was no way it could stick like that just by cauterizing the flesh with burning internal energy. "My lord. What did you do?" "This." As soon as he finished speaking, Mok Jayangan lightly slapped the back of Mong Muyak's connected severed hand. Slap. Flinch. Why was he doing that? As he was puzzled, an even more surprising thing happened. This is... What? Mong Muyak, who had been in so much pain that he even shed tears, couldn't hide his astonishment as he looked at his left arm. Twitch. The fingers below the severed area were trembling and moving slightly. Siap Chun, who was watching this, also widened his eyes. No way. He thought it was a pointless prank, but the severed arm really seemed to have reconnected. Seeing this, Mok Jayangan twitched the corners of his mouth. It succeeded. This was a sorcery technique called the Three Wonders Method. It was a technique from a secret book hidden by Cho Taechong, the Three-Eyed, a master of healing arts. It was a miraculous technique that could even reconnect a severed arm if a few tricky conditions were met. For example, there were several conditions, such as the severed body part must not exceed 1 hour. The biggest constraint among them was that the recipient's original energy would be consumed. Naturally, the stronger the technique, the greater the conditions and constraints, but it didn't matter since it wasn't consuming his own original energy. Besides, there was no need to downplay it when the person involved was so moved. Mok Jayangan said to Mong Muyak, "It will take some time for the severed blood vessels and nerves to fully reconnect, so be careful and splint it for about 5 days." At these words, Mong Muyak looked at Mok Jayangan with trembling eyes. What the hell was this bastard's true identity? How was this possible without being Hua Tua or Bien Ke? While he was moved, he also felt somewhat terrified of this bizarre ability. To him, who was so speechless that he couldn't easily part his lips, Mok Jayangan said with the corners of his mouth raised. "Now there won't be any significant issues in continuing the mission." Huh? Instantly, Mong Muyak's expression stiffened.